They called me a thief in front of the entire family. My own cousin stood up at the will reading, looked me dead in the eyes, and said I didn't deserve a single penny. My uncle nodded. My aunt smiled. 7 people in that room. 7 people who watched me grow up. Not one of them defended me. I sat at the end of that polished conference table in a gray blazer I'd owned since college. Hands flat on the wood, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, and I said nothing. Because what could I say to people who had already buried me? But here is what none of them knew. Not my uncle, not my aunt, not my cousin who had just publicly accused me of stealing from a dying woman. For the last 4 months of her life, my grandmother had been building something. Not with a lawyer, not with police. From a hospital bed with a laptop she could barely operate and a cloud account I had set up for her with my own hands 14 months earlier. She had been watching, quietly, patiently, the way she watched everything. And in less than 10 minutes, the sealed envelope sitting in front of that attorney was going to crack the entire family in half. I didn't see it coming either. My name is Cora. I am 33 years old. And this is the story of how a blinking green light, a bowl of chicken soup, and a woman everyone underestimated turned a courtroom of lies into the loudest silence I have ever heard. If you have ever been the quiet one, the one who showed up, the one who got blamed anyway, stay with me. Because what happened in that conference room is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Before we go further, if stories about quiet justice, family betrayal, and truth that arrives exactly on time speak to your soul, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from, because the next part of this story is where everything begins to break. My mother died when I was 12, ovarian cancer. Caught late, my father lasted 6 weeks after the funeral. Then he drove to a motel in Reno and never came back. He left a note on the kitchen counter. 4 words, "I'm sorry, kid." He took the goods suitcase and left me the empty house. Grandma Dorothy took me in without hesitation. She was 60 years old, lived alone in a 3-bedroom ranch in Hadley, Connecticut. And from the day I walked through her door, she never once made me feel like a burden. Sundays were ours. She started the chicken soup at 7 in the morning. Carrots, celery. 1 bay leaf pulled from a jar that had lived in the same cabinet since 1987. She ladled it into the same blue Tupperware container, snapped the lid on tight, and handed it to me for the week. "Soup is love you can reheat," she would say. And she meant every word. I put myself through Central Connecticut State on night shifts at a data center, graduated with a degree in information systems, landed a job in cloud infrastructure, moved 40 minutes away, close enough to visit, far enough to breathe, and every single Sunday I came back, through snow, through summer construction, through rain so thick the wipers gave up, because Dorothy Vance was the only person in my entire life who ever showed up for me without conditions, and the least I could do was show up for her. Everyone in that family loved Grandma's money. I just loved Grandma. Maybe that is why they never understood me, or maybe that is why they decided I had to be the problem. 14 months before the will reading, Grandma fell. She was reaching for the mixing bowl on the top shelf, the one she used for her cornbread. Her hip gave out on the kitchen tile. I got the call at work, drove 40 minutes in 28, found her sitting on the floor pressing a dish towel to her elbow, more annoyed than hurt. "I've been falling since before you were born," she told the paramedic, but I saw her face when she tried to stand. For the first time in my life, I saw Dorothy Vance afraid. That weekend, I installed a security system, 2 cameras inside, one at the front door, one covering the living room and kitchen, nothing fancy, the kind of system you buy at any hardware store. But I am an infrastructure engineer, so I built it the way I build everything: cloud backup, continuous retention, auto upload, encrypted storage on a paid plan I covered out of my own pocket. Nothing deleted unless you logged in and removed it manually. I created the account under her name, her email, her password. Then I removed my own access. She asked me why. I told her it was her home, her privacy, And if she ever needed to show anyone what happened inside those walls, it would be hers to share. Not mine, she laughed. Who am I going to show? The cat. The little green LED on the living room camera blinked twice when it powered on. A steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. She pointed at it the first week and said that little light makes me feel like somebody is watching. I told her that was the whole point. What I did not know, what I could not have known. Was that 14 months later that blinking green light would be the only witness in my entire life that told the truth, when every single person in my family chose to lie. Let me tell you about the rest of the family. Uncle Robert, Grandma's only son, 58 years old, thick hands, firm handshake, a leased Cadillac he could not afford. 30 years in commercial real estate, lost money on 4 of his last 5 deals, refinanced his house twice. Aunt Sandra. The kind of woman who posted from church every Sunday and made it look like a personal brand, organized the bake sale, sang in the choir, kept a mental spreadsheet of who owed her a compliment. Their daughter, cousin Veronica, 31 years old, perfect nails, curated posts, blessed in the bio, pharmaceutical sales, spent like she was in private equity. Veronica and I grew up together. Somewhere around high school, she decided I was competition, not because I competed, because Grandma kept saying things like Cora drove through the snow again last Sunday. That was enough. To them, I was the girl who showed up too much, the one always in the kitchen, always fixing something, always there. Robert called me the handyman once at Thanksgiving. Sandra laughed. Veronica didn't even look up from her phone. They never asked about my job. They never asked how I paid for school. They certainly never asked why I came every Sunday. They just assumed I wanted something. The first time I heard Sandra say Mom should really think about who is around her so much, I told myself she did not mean it the way it sounded. She did. 3 things disappeared in the first 2 months. A gold bracelet Grandma wore to my mother's funeral, a pair of garnet earrings she kept in a velvet pouch, and my grandfather's wedding band. A plain silver ring she had stored in the cedar box on her dresser since he died in 2011. She noticed the ring first, called me on a Tuesday. Cora, have you seen your grandfather's ring? I could swear I left it in the box. I hadn't. I told her maybe she moved it during spring cleaning. She accepted that, but I heard the doubt in her pause. A week later, Sandra came by for what she called a wellness check. She brought store-bought cookies and a question. Mom, have you thought about who has keys to the house? Grandma had 3 sets. One for herself, one for me, one for Robert. Sandra looked at me when she asked. Not at Robert, not at anyone else, just me. It is just something to think about, she added. You are here so much, Cora. Things get moved around. I did not take the bait. I washed the dishes, kissed Grandma goodbye, drove home with my jaw tight and my chest heavier than it had been in years. That night lying in bed, I thought about what I would have said if I were a different person. Something sharp, something final, but I am not built that way. I fix systems, I do not fight people. And I told myself the truth would surface eventually. Because that is what truth does. It does not need a megaphone, it just needs time. I was right about that. I was just wrong about how much time. And how much it would cost me first. Grandma had a pearl necklace, not costume pearls, real ones, with a gold clasp shaped like a seashell. Grandpa gave them to her on their wedding day in 1965. She wore them exactly 3 times a year. Their anniversary, Christmas Eve, and the day my mother was born. She kept them in the cedar box on her dresser, the same one that once held Grandpa's ring. When I was a girl, she let me hold them while she told me the story. Your grandfather saved for 11 months, she would say. He skipped lunch every day and told his boss he was fasting. The day the family came for a group photo, I clasped them around her neck. Sandra's idea, something about a church directory. Grandma stood by the window in her navy dress. The pearls caught the afternoon light, and for a second she looked 30 years younger. Veronica stared at them the entire shoot, not at Grandma, at the necklace. She did not say anything. She did not need to. I saw her fingers twitch once, like she was pricing them in her head. After the shoot, while I was helping Grandma change, she put her hand on mine and said, "These are for the one who stays." I told her not to talk like that. She smiled. "I am 80, sweetheart. I can talk however I want." Everyone in the family knew about those pearls. Robert mentioned their value at least once a year. "Those are worth a good 12,000, you know." Sandra once suggested Grandma put them in a safe deposit box. For security, Veronica just watched and waited. Everyone wanted those pearls. Only one person would actually take them. The cameo brooch went next. Then the gold cufflinks that had belonged to my grandfather's father. Then a small crystal vase Grandma kept on the mantel. Each time Dorothy would mention it casually. "I must be losing my mind, Cora." And each time Sandra tightened the noose a little more. "It is concerning," she told Robert on the phone, loud enough for me to overhear at a Sunday lunch. Someone with that much access. She let the sentence trail off. She did not have to finish it. Then I found out about the group chat. Veronica had created a family text thread months earlier. Vance Family Updates, she called it. Robert, Sandra, Veronica, and Grandma were in it. I was not. I discovered this by accident. Grandma was showing me a photo Sandra had texted. A picture from her church fundraiser, and I saw the thread name at the top of the screen. 37 messages I had never seen. Was I in this chat? I asked Grandma. She squinted at the phone. "I thought so, sweetheart. Maybe it is a glitch." It was not a glitch. I checked my own phone. No thread, no invitation, no record I had ever been included. I told myself it was an oversight. Maybe Veronica just forgot. Maybe there were 2 threads. But that night I sat in my apartment with the overhead light off and my phone in my hand, scrolling through messages, looking for a conversation that did not exist. And I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. They were not just suspicious of me, they were building something. Being left out of a group chat sounds small. It was not small. It was the beginning of a frame. Grandma's heart started to fail in October. Congestive, the cardiologist said, fluid buildup. She would be out of breath after walking to the mailbox. She stopped baking. She stopped going to church. The world got smaller, one room at a time. Until most of her days were spent in the recliner by the living room window. Wrapped in a blue Afghan I had bought her 4 Christmases ago. I came every Sunday. I still came every Sunday. But now I also came Wednesdays, and sometimes Fridays, and I brought the soup to her instead of the other way around. The last time she ate a full bowl was in November. I sat across from her at the kitchen table watching her hands shake around the spoon, and I wanted to say something large and meaningful, but all I managed was, "More crackers." She shook her head. Then she looked past me, toward the living room doorway, where the little green light on the camera blinked its steady rhythm. She watched it for a long moment, longer than made sense. "Don't worry about me, sweetheart," she said quietly. "I see more than they think." I almost asked her what she meant. Almost, but her eyes were tired and the soup was getting cold. And I told myself she was just being Grandma. Cryptic, stubborn, always 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. I kissed her forehead, cleared the dishes, drove home in the dark. That was our last Sunday soup. 6 weeks later she was gone, and I still did not know what she meant. But Dorothy Vance had always kept her promises, every single one. She just made this one. From the other side, Dorothy Vance died on a Tuesday in December. The hospice nurse called me at 6:14 in the morning. I drove to the house in sweatpants and a coat I did not zip. She was still in the recliner. The Afghan pulled up to her chin. Her reading glasses sat on the armrest, like she had just set them down to rest her eyes. I held her hand for a long time. It was cold. But I held it anyway. Robert arrived an hour later. Sandra came with him, already dressed for company, lipstick, earrings, a black cardigan she must have picked the night before. Veronica showed up around noon with a latte and a face full of fresh makeup. I handled the logistics, called the funeral home, pulled the insurance folder from the filing cabinet, started a list of people to notify, and while I was in the bedroom getting Grandma's address book, I opened the cedar box on the dresser. It was empty. The pearls were gone. I stood in that bedroom doorway holding an empty cedar box, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not grief. I already had that. This was something else. The slow recognition that someone in my family had walked into this house while my grandmother was dying, and taken the only thing she had ever said was mine. I closed the box, put it back on the dresser, and I did not say a word to anyone, because I did not yet know who to accuse, and I was not the kind of person who accused without proof. I would soon learn. That neither was Grandma. The funeral was Friday, white lilies, polished pews. A program Sandra designed herself with a photo of Grandma from 1998. Robert gave the eulogy. He talked about sacrifice. He talked about family values. He used the phrase unconditional love 3 times and made eye contact with the pastor every time. Sandra greeted every guest by name like she was hosting a dinner party. Veronica posted a tribute reel before the service ended. 15 seconds of old photos set to piano music. Captioned "Rest Easy Grandma," white heart emoji, 200 likes before the reception started. I carried the folding chairs. I drove the leftover flowers to the church basement. I signed the paperwork at the funeral home because no one else offered. I wrote the check for the balance because no one else volunteered. Nobody filmed that. Nobody posted it. After the service, while the family picked at cold cuts, I overheard Robert corner Gerald Aldridge, Grandma's estate attorney, by the coffee station. "When can we schedule the reading?" he asked. Not "how are the arrangements," not "is everything in order." When? Aldridge stirred his coffee and said, "I will be in touch." Robert nodded like he had just closed a deal, walked back to Sandra. Leaned down, whispered something. She smiled. At a funeral. That smile told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. 2 days later, Robert called. "Cora, I am not accusing you of anything," he began, which is exactly how people start accusations. "But Sandra and I have been talking. Some items are unaccounted for, and you were there more than anyone." I listened. I let him finish. 4 minutes without pausing. Then he said, "We just want to clear the air before the will reading." I thanked him for calling, hung up. Sat in my car in the parking garage at work for 11 minutes, staring at the concrete wall, feeling something I had not felt since the night my father left. The particular sting of being blamed by people who are supposed to protect you. A week before the will reading, I went to Grandma's house to pick up the cleaning supplies I had left under the kitchen sink. Robert's Cadillac was in the driveway. I almost turned around. But I needed the supplies, so I went in through the side door. He was in the dining room, on the phone, pacing. I could hear him through the wall. "If I don't cover it by the 15th, we lose the house, Janet." I am not exaggerating. His voice cracked on the word house. Not angry, afraid. The kind of afraid that does not care who hears it. I have got nothing liquid. The Brookfield deal fell through. Sandra does not even know the half of it. I just need 60 days. I stood in the kitchen with a bottle of Windex in my hand and felt something I did not expect. Pity. For a single moment, Robert was not the man who called me the handyman. He was a 58-year-old man watching his life collapse. Then he hung up. Walked into the kitchen, saw me. The fear drained out of his face. Something harder replaced it. "Cora, you are here again." He said it like an accusation. "Just getting my things," I said. He nodded. Then, without looking at me, he added, "You know Mom kept a lot of valuables in the bedroom. I hope you have been careful with them." That was the moment the pity died. He was not desperate. He was calculating, and desperate people who calculate are the most dangerous kind. That night I thought about the cameras. I opened my laptop, pulled up the cloud provider login page, typed in the email address I had used during setup, Grandma's email, and stopped. I did not have her password. I had created the account under her credentials, verified it with her phone, then deliberately removed my own admin access. I did it to respect her privacy. I did it because I am an infrastructure engineer who believes in access controls and principle of least privilege. And now that principle was locking me out of the only evidence that could clear my name. I tried the recovery option. It sent a code to Grandma's phone, sitting in a drawer at her house. locked with a passcode I did not know. For half a second I wondered whether Dorothy herself had ever actually logged in. I had walked her through it once, drawn little diagrams on a napkin. But she had squinted at the screen and said, "Sweetheart, I can barely work the microwave." I had laughed, she had laughed, and I had filed her away as someone who would never touch that account. Which meant nobody could. The footage existed, somewhere on a server in Virginia or Ohio, every clip from the last 14 months, sitting in encrypted storage, time-stamped, untouched. And I could not reach any of it. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark for a while. The system worked exactly as I had designed it. That was the problem. Aunt Margaret called me on a Thursday. Margaret was Grandma's younger sister, 76 years old, lived in a retirement community in Glastonbury, wore the same turquoise reading glasses every day. Had never once in her life raised her voice. She was not in the Vance family updates group chat either. She had been removed the same week I was. "Cora, I need to show you something," she said. "Can you come over?" I drove to Glastonbury. She was waiting at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile and her phone face down. She turned it over and slid it toward me. A screenshot. The Vance family updates group chat, dated 3 weeks before Grandma died. Sandra's message. Time-stamped 9:47 p.m. We need to get ahead of this. Make sure everyone knows Cora is the one who has been alone with Mom's jewelry. If anything comes up at the reading, we need a clear story. Below it, Robert's reply. Agreed. Keep it simple. She had access, nobody else did, and Veronica, already told 2 people at the reception, handled. I read it 3 times, then I read it a 4th time. Because I wanted to make sure I was not imagining it. I was not. They had planned it. Before Grandma was even cold, they had built a narrative. Sandra had seeded it. Robert had endorsed it. Veronica had distributed it, and they had kicked both Margaret and me out of the chat, so we would never see the playbook. Margaret watched me read it. She did not say, "I am sorry." She did not say, "I knew something was wrong." She just reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "Dorothy would have wanted you to have this," she said. I saved the screenshot to my phone. And for the first time since the funeral, I stopped feeling confused. I was not paranoid. I was being framed. Now stay with me. Because here is where I had to make a decision that would change everything. My first instinct was to send that screenshot to everyone, blast it to the family, post it online. Forward it to the lawyer. Let the whole world see what Sandra and Robert and Veronica had been doing in the dark. I did not. Not because I was scared, because I know how systems work. I have spent my career building infrastructure, redundancies, fail-safes, audit trails, and the one thing I have learned is that the loudest alarm is never the most effective one. The most effective one is the one that has already been recording. I did not have access to the footage, but I knew it existed. I knew it was sitting on a server somewhere, intact. The screenshot proved motive. The cameras would prove the crime. All I had to do was show up to the will reading, and let the system I built do what systems do. Tell the truth without raising its voice. So I stopped defending myself out loud. When Robert called, I kept it short. When Sandra texted asking if I had found anything of Mom's that belongs to the family, I replied with one word. No. When Veronica posted a photo of Grandma's living room, captioned "Cleaning out Grandma's place, so many memories," I did not comment. I did not react. I did not give them a single thing to use against me. Let them talk. Let them scheme. Let them build their careful little story, because somewhere in the cloud another story was already written. In timestamps and pixels and the steady green blink of a camera that never stopped watching. What I did not know yet was that someone else had already accessed it. Gerald Aldridge called on a Monday. The reading was scheduled for Thursday, 10 in the morning, his office in downtown Hartford. He asked if I would be attending. I said yes. I asked if there was anything I should prepare. He paused. The kind of pause that holds something back, and said, "Just bring yourself, Ms. Sheridan." That same evening, Veronica texted, "No greeting, no small talk. FYI, the reading is Thursday. You probably should not come. It will be awkward for you." I replied, "I will be there." She did not respond. Over the next 3 days, the family moved like they were rehearsing for a performance. Sandra called Aunt Margaret to ask what she was wearing. Robert emailed the lawyer's office twice asking for a rough outline of the distribution. Veronica posted a story of herself at a nail salon. Caption: self-care before a hard week. Wednesday night, the night before the reading, I drove to Grandma's house one more time. I did not plan to. I was on my way home from the grocery store, and the turn came up and my hands just moved the wheel. The house was dark. The porch light off. Nobody had replaced the bulb since the funeral. I let myself in with my key. The kitchen smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. The recliner was empty. The Afghan folded on the couch, which meant someone had moved it. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching nothing, remembering everything. The counter where she kneaded dough, the window where she watched cardinals, the hook by the door where she hung her apron. The one with the faded sunflowers she refused to replace because it still works fine. I stopped in the living room doorway. The camera was still mounted in the corner above the bookshelf. Angled toward the kitchen and the front hall, the little green light blinked, steady, patient, still recording, still uploading to a cloud account I could not access, on a server I could not touch. Holding footage I could not see, I stared at that light for a long time. It stared back. "What did you see?" I whispered to the empty room. The light blinked. I locked the door behind me, drove home. Slept 4 hours. In the morning, I put on the gray blazer, brushed my hair, drove to Hartford. I did not know what the will said. I did not know what the cameras had captured. I did not know that in 90 minutes every lie my family had told would be played back to them in high definition. All I knew was that Grandma had said I see more than they think. And Dorothy Vance never bluffed. Gerald Aldridge's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building on Asylum Street, polished wood, leather chairs, a conference table that seated 12. It smelled like old paper and new coffee. I arrived at 9:48. Aunt Margaret was already there, sitting near the window in her turquoise glasses, hands folded in her lap. She gave me a small nod. No words. Robert and Sandra came next. Robert wore a navy suit that pulled at the buttons. Sandra wore black, still in funeral mode, still performing. She carried a leather folder, as if she planned to take notes. Veronica arrived last, 5 minutes late, heels, cream blazer, phone already in hand. She scanned the room like she was checking a seating chart. 2 of Grandma's cousins, Harold and June, sat near the door. The legal assistant sat in the corner with a laptop. Aldridge stood at the head of the table. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a pen in his breast pocket. The room was tight, not physically. The table was large enough, but the air felt compressed. Like everyone was breathing shallowly and pretending not to. I sat at the far end next to Margaret, hands flat on the table, blazer buttoned, nothing in front of me, no folder, no phone. No expectations. Veronica glanced at me once and whispered something to Sandra, bold of her to show up. I heard it. I let it pass. Aldridge opened by reading the preamble. I, Dorothy Ann Vance, being of sound mind and body. The kind of words that make death feel administrative. The first bequests were small. The antique clock with the ship's wheel face went to Cousin Harold. A set of first edition Agatha Christie novels went to June. A donation of $5,000 to the Hadley Community Library. Margaret received Grandma's writing desk. She pressed her glasses up her nose and whispered, "Thank you, Dot." The room relaxed. Robert shifted in his seat. Sandra uncapped a pen. Veronica leaned forward slightly. The first sign of real interest. They were waiting for the main event. I watched them watch Aldridge, and I recognized the look on their faces. It was not grief. It was not respect. It was anticipation, the same look you see at an auction before the bidding starts. Robert had already done the math. Sandra had her pen ready. Veronica was composing the Instagram post in her head. I could see her choosing the filter. Aldridge turned to the next page. He paused. The pause was longer than it needed to be. Nobody noticed but me. Before Aldridge could continue, Veronica spoke. She did not raise her hand. She did not wait for a break. She just cut in, as if the will reading were a meeting she was running. Before we go further, she said, her voice polished and steady, I think we need to address something. She turned in her chair to face the table. Several pieces of Grandma's jewelry have gone missing over the past year. A bracelet, earrings, Grandpa's wedding ring, and most recently the pearl necklace. She paused for effect. She had rehearsed this. We all know who had the most access to Grandma's house, who had a key, who was there every week, sometimes multiple times a week. Unsupervised, she did not say my name. Not yet. Sandra picked up the thread. We have been discussing this privately, she said, opening her leather folder, and we feel it is important to put it on record before any distributions are made. She pulled out a typed list. Dates, items, estimated values, a document. She had brought a document. Robert cleared his throat. Nobody is making accusations, he said, making an accusation. But Cora was the only one with consistent physical access, and the timeline matches. Then he looked at me. They all looked at me. Harold and June shifted uncomfortably. The legal assistant stopped typing. Margaret's hand found mine under the table, and I sat there, at the end of a conference table, being convicted of a crime I did not commit. By the people who actually committed it. Veronica stood up. She actually stood, as if this were a courtroom, and she was delivering a closing argument. Let us be honest, she said. We all know what happened. Cora had keys. Cora was there alone. Cora was the one handling Grandma's things. She swept her hand around the table, gathering the room. Does anyone here disagree? Nobody spoke. Robert shook his head slowly, reinforcing the silence. Sandra pressed her lips together. Harold looked at the table. June looked at the window. Even Margaret, my one ally, flinched. So before we talk about who gets what, Veronica continued, her voice rising just enough to fill the room, I think it needs to be said. She looked directly at me. She does not deserve a penny. The words landed like a slap against tile. Clean, sharp, final. The room did not gasp, it agreed. Robert nodded. Sandra folded her hands. Harold avoided my eyes. June studied her fingernails, and I did nothing. I did not stand. I did not argue. I did not pull out the screenshot Margaret had given me and slam it on the table. I just sat there, hands flat on the wood, jaw locked. Heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I thought about defending myself. I wrote the opening sentence in my head. I have never taken a single thing from that house. But the words would not come, because the truth is, when every person in a room has already decided you are guilty, speaking only makes you look more desperate, so I stayed quiet. The way I had been quiet my whole life. The way Grandma had been quiet in the months before she died. And I would learn in about 4 minutes that Grandma's quiet had teeth, if you are still with me. If your heart is pounding the way mine was that morning, do me one favor, hit that like button right now, because what Gerald Aldridge said next is the moment everything changed. And I do not want you to miss a single second of it. Gerald Aldridge let the silence hold for exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then he removed his glasses, cleaned them with a cloth from his pocket, placed them back on his nose, with the calm of a man who has watched families unravel over money more times than he can count. Before anyone leaves, he said, I would like to note that Mrs. Vance anticipated this moment. The room shifted. Robert uncrossed his arms. Sandra's pen stopped moving. Veronica, still standing, looked at the lawyer like he had just spoken a language she did not recognize. What do you mean anticipated? Robert asked. Aldridge reached into a manila envelope beside his file. It was sealed, the kind of seal you do not break casually. Red wax, an embossed stamp from his firm. Your mother came to see me 4 months before her passing, he said. She was very specific about how this meeting should proceed. He broke the seal. Inside was a single typed letter, a USB drive, and a pawn shop receipt. Aldridge set each item on the table, one at a time, like a man laying out evidence, which, as it turned out, was exactly what he was doing. Mrs. Vance left an addendum to her will, he said. Along with supporting materials, she asked me to present in full, to everyone in this room. He looked up. His eyes moved from Robert to Sandra to Veronica. Then to me, and then, Gerald Aldridge smiled, not a smirk, not satisfaction, the smile of someone fulfilling a promise to a woman he respected, a woman who had sat in his office, frail and sharp-eyed, and told him exactly what she wanted to happen. In this room, on this day. Shall we continue, he said. Aldridge unfolded the letter and read the first line aloud. To my family gathered here. I hope you are comfortable, because what follows may change the way you see each other. Robert leaned forward. Sandra gripped her pen. Veronica sat down slowly. As if the air had been pressed out of her legs, Aldridge continued. For the past 8 months, items have been disappearing from my home. Jewelry, cash, keepsakes your father left me, I noticed. I said nothing, because I wanted to be sure. He turned the page. When Cora installed the cameras in my home last year, she did it to keep me safe. She set up the cloud account under my name and removed her own access, because that is the kind of person she is. She respects boundaries even when no one else does. Sandra's face went white. Robert's jaw tightened. Veronica's eyes darted to the USB drive on the table. I taught myself how to log in. Cora had shown me how months earlier when she was explaining how the backup worked. She was patient. She drew diagrams. She did not know I would actually use it. Aldridge paused, looked up. The room was airless. I reviewed the footage, all of it. I figured out how to download the clips I needed. It took me 3 evenings and a lot of squinting. And I saved them to a USB drive Gerald gave me, and I know exactly who has been taking from me. He set the letter down, picked up the USB drive. Then he said the words that split the room in 2. She left everything to the one who helped her catch the thief in this family. Veronica let out a short, sharp laugh. What thief, she said, but her voice had changed. The polish was gone, the rehearsal was gone. What was left was a 31-year-old woman who had just realized that the dead do not always stay silent. Aldridge plugged the USB drive into his laptop, turned the screen to face the table. The legal assistant dimmed the overhead lights without being asked, as if this too had been arranged. The first clip was dated August 14th, the living room camera, nighttime. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. The front door opened. Robert walked in. He was wearing a jacket and sneakers, moving quickly, not turning on the lights. He went straight to the bedroom. The camera caught him through the doorway, pulling open the top drawer of Grandma's dresser, removing a small velvet pouch, the garnet earrings, tucking it into his jacket pocket. In and out in under 3 minutes. The second clip, September 22nd, same camera, daytime. Grandma was asleep in her recliner, the Afghan over her legs. Veronica walked in through the front door, carrying a grocery bag she never unpacked. She went to the bedroom. The camera caught her opening the cedar box on the dresser. She lifted out the pearl necklace, held it up for a moment, 2 seconds, maybe 3, then dropped it into her purse and zipped it shut. She walked back through the living room without looking at Grandma. She left the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. It was still there when I came the next Sunday. The third clip, October 9th. Sandra standing at the front door, glancing left and right, before waving Robert inside. The room went silent, not the kind of silence that comes from shock, the kind that comes from recognition. The slow, irreversible understanding that you are watching something you cannot unsee, cannot deny, and cannot undo. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Harold closed his eyes. June covered her mouth. Margaret squeezed my hand so hard the bones shifted. Veronica broke first. That is fake, she said, her voice too high, too fast. Someone edited that. That is not real. She turned to Robert. Tell them it is not real. Robert did not answer. His face had gone gray, the color of wet newspaper, his hands flat on the table, pressing down, like the surface might give way. Sandra started talking, not to anyone specific, just into the room. A stream of words aimed at no one. This is out of context. We were checking on her. Robert had every right to be there. She is his mother. Aldridge let them talk. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He just sat at the head of the table, hands folded, the way a man sits when he knows the evidence has already spoken. Those cameras were illegal, Veronica tried. She cannot just. You cannot just film people without consent. Ms. Vance Aldridge said quietly, "This is a homeowner's security system. Installed in her own residence, on her own property, recording persons who entered voluntarily. There is no consent requirement under Connecticut law for video surveillance in a private home." Your grandmother was well aware of this. Veronica's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sandra pushed back from the table. "I want a lawyer." "You are welcome to retain one," Aldridge replied. Then he turned to me, and here is what I did not do. I did not stand up. I did not point. I did not say "I told you so." I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I sat at the end of that table, in my gray blazer and my graduation flats, and I looked at the family that had called me a thief, and I said nothing, because the truth had already spoken, and the truth did not need my help. Aldridge picked up the letter again. To Cora he read, "You never asked me for anything. Not the house. Not the jewelry, not even a thank you. You came because you wanted to come. You stayed because that is who you are. You set up those cameras to watch over me. You did not know I would end up watching them too." He paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the HVAC system cycling through the vent above the window. I do not blame Robert. I do not blame Sandra or Veronica. Blame does not fix what is broken. But I will not pretend I did not see what I saw, and I will not let you take the fall for what they did. He set the letter down, placed the pawn shop receipt next to it. This receipt, he said, was found in Mr. Vance's vehicle during a search conducted by a private investigator retained by Mrs. Vance prior to her death. It documents the sale of a pearl necklace described as, he read from the receipt, freshwater pearl strand, gold clasp, estimated value $12,400. The receipt is in Mr. Robert Vance's name, dated October 30th. Robert closed his eyes. Sandra put her face in her hands. Veronica stared at the receipt like it might disappear if she looked hard enough. Aldridge read the last line of Dorothy's letter. "I left it to the one who came when no one was watching." He folded the letter, placed it in the envelope, looked at me. Mrs. Vance's amended will. Executed with 2 witnesses and notarized on November 2nd. Designates Miss Cora Sheridan as the sole beneficiary of the residuary estate, including the property at 412 Maple Lane. All financial accounts and all personal effects. The pearl necklace is to be recovered and returned to Miss Sheridan. The room cracked open. Robert stood, knocking his chair back. "This is insane. I will contest this. She was sick. She was not in her right mind." Aldridge did not flinch. Mrs. Vance underwent a cognitive evaluation 3 days before executing the amendment. The results are attached. She scored in the 97th percentile for her age group. Sandra was crying, not the way people cry when they are sorry, the way they cry when they have been caught. And the crying is the only tool left. She was our mother. Sandra managed. We took care of her too. The footage suggests otherwise, Aldridge said. That was all. Veronica grabbed her purse and headed for the door. She stopped with her hand on the knob, turned back to me. Her eyes were wet, but the look behind them was not grief. It was fury. The specific fury of someone who has been outplayed by a woman they underestimated. She did not say anything. She did not need to. I stood, picked up the cedar box. Aldridge had brought it from the house as part of the estate materials. I held it in both hands, and I said one thing: "You can keep the story you told. I will keep the truth she left." Then I sat back down, placed the cedar box on the table in front of me, and waited for the rest of the paperwork. Nobody else spoke. Margaret was crying. Harold cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. June dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The legal assistant typed something into the laptop, and Gerald Aldridge, who had kept a dead woman's promise down to the last comma, turned to the next page. The rest was legal and measurable. Aldridge outlined the restitution terms Dorothy had specified. Robert was presented with a choice: sign a restitution agreement to repay the appraised value of all items taken, just over $41,000 including the pearls, the garnet earrings, Grandpa's wedding band, the bracelet, the cufflinks, or the estate would file a civil recovery claim. He signed, 90 days to pay in full, the private investigator's report, the footage. The pawn receipt, all on file if he did not. I chose not to pursue criminal charges, not because they did not deserve it, but because Grandma did not ask me to. Her letter said I do not blame Robert. And I trusted her judgment more than my anger. Robert sold his boat within 2 weeks. Sandra stopped posting on the church Facebook page. Veronica deactivated her Instagram the day after the reading, and has not reactivated it since. The pearls were recovered from the pawn shop. Aldridge's investigator had already arranged it. They were returned to the estate. The cedar box was not empty anymore. Aunt Margaret walked me to my car after the reading. She did not say much. She put her hand on my shoulder. The way Grandma used to, she always knew, sweetheart. She always knew. I drove home with the cedar box on the passenger seat and the windows down even though it was December, because I needed the cold air to remind me that I was real, and that this had actually happened. I kept the house. I moved in 3 weeks after the reading, into the bedroom I had slept in as a teenager, with the same quilt, and the same view of the maple tree in the backyard. I kept the recliner, I kept the Afghan. I kept the filing cabinet with the insurance folder and the address book, and the recipe for chicken soup written on a yellow index card in Grandma's handwriting. Carrots. Celery. 1 bay leaf from the jar. Low heat, don't rush it. Sundays are still Sundays. Margaret comes now. She drives over from Glastonbury and we sit at the kitchen table and I serve the soup in the blue Tupperware, because it does not taste right in anything else. Harold and June come once a month. A couple of the younger cousins, the ones who had not been pulled into the current, started calling again. I did not make them apologize. I just opened the door. Robert has not called. Sandra sent a card at Christmas. No return address. No apology, just a generic peace and blessings message printed inside. I recycled it. Veronica I have not seen at all. The door is closed. Not locked, just closed. Last week I took the pearl necklace out of the safe deposit box I had moved it to and placed it back in the cedar box on the dresser, where it belongs. I held it for a moment, felt the weight of it, the cool smoothness of each bead, the tiny gold clasp shaped like a seashell that my grandfather saved 11 months of skipped lunches to buy. Then I looked up, at the corner of the living room. The camera was still there. The little green light was still blinking. I climbed onto a chair, reached up, and turned it off. The light went dark for the first time in 14 months. I did not need it anymore. Grandma did not need it anymore. The truth had done its work, and some lights are only meant to stay on until the right person finally sees them. I sat on the floor of that living room, the same floor where Grandma had fallen, where she had spent her last months in that recliner. Where she had whispered to me, "I see more than they think," and I cried, not for the betrayal. I had already cried for that. I cried because for the first time in my entire life, since the day my mother died, since the night my father drove away with the good suitcase, since every Sunday I drove through snow that should have kept me home, I finally understood what she had been trying to teach me, that love is not loud. Love does not post about itself. Love does not need an audience. Love is a woman who is dying, teaching herself to use a laptop from a hospital bed so that the granddaughter who showed up will not be the one who pays. Love is a green light that blinks in the dark for 14 months. Waiting. Love is a bowl of soup in a blue Tupperware container that still smells like home. Grandma never raised her voice once in 81 years. She just made sure that in the end, the truth got the last word. That is my story. A quiet woman, a blinking green light, and a grandmother who saw everything. If there is someone in your life who shows up for you when no one else is watching, I am asking you, please, tell them today, not tomorrow, not next Sunday, today. Because we do not always get a second chance. We do not always get a will to speak for us. Sometimes the only thing that survives is what we said, and what we did not say. While the person who loved us most was still here to hear it, if this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you of someone, a grandmother, a mother, an aunt, a friend who showed up when no one else did, Do 3 things for me right now. 1. Hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories like this one. Stories of quiet people who finally got heard. And I do not want you to miss the next one. 2. Smash that like button. It tells me you are still here, that stories like Grandma's still matter. That the quiet ones still deserve to be remembered. 3. Drop a comment below. Tell me about the person in your life who showed up when no one was watching. Their name, one memory. One reason they mattered. I read every single comment, and I promise you, someone reading this needs to see that name today. Share this story with the person who needs to hear it, and remember, some lights are only meant to stay on until the right person finally sees them. I will see you in the next one.